Republican candidate for Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District. Jessi Ebben is our very special guest today, Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live. Today's show is being streamed on DrydenWire's Facebook page and YouTube channel, so however you are watching, thank you for joining us. If you miss any of today's broadcast, no worries. You can watch the full recording on our website later today simply by visiting DrydenWire.com. With that, we welcome today's guest, Republican candidate for Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, Jessi Ebben. Jessi, good morning.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you?
Good. It's good to be on here. Long-time viewer, first-time guest.
Aw. Well, it's going to be a good day, by the way, because I looked up like the national, what day is it today? And look at this. We're going to have good vibes. It's International Day of Peaceful Communication.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's very conversational.
And also, it's National Forgiveness and Happiness Day.
Wow.
Yeah, and National Inner Beauty Day. I know, and You Matter to Me Day.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
People... That feels good.
Yeah, it does. Good vibes today. So you're running, so obviously Congressman Tom Tiffany, the current 7th Congressional District Representative, announced that he's running for governor. You have announced that you are a candidate now for the 7th Congressional. We can get into all of that here in a little bit. But first, because it's not our shows, as you know, it's kind of getting to know the person. Sometimes, I wouldn't say that's more important than the politics. The politics is important. But let's get to know you a little bit. So for the people who don't know you, tell us about you. Where were you born and raised?
Yeah, so I was born in central Wisconsin, raised there, had a great upbringing, grew up in the country. Didn't grow up on a farm. I'm the daughter of a farmer's daughter, but didn't grow up on a farm, but farm adjacent, all my neighbors. So had those good heartland values of hard work and fiscal responsibility and helping your neighbor out. And then ended up at UW-Eau Claire, so in western Wisconsin for my college years, and that's what brought me to the Chippewa Valley region. And really there, I mean, right, we're talking about politics. I'm running for office. That was a very transformative time for me. I was extremely engaged in campus life, but a big thing that happened there actually propelled me into politics. That's why I'm sitting here today. So my parents are teachers, and I don't know if you remember the Act. This is about 15 years ago now, so this is a while ago. But the Act 10 Walker recall. So my parents, being teachers, were told through that process that Act 10, if that went into place, they were going to be fired. And this was by the teachers unions. A lot of fear mongering messaging. So my parents, as older teachers, were told that they would be the first to be let go. That's not what happened, but at the time that it was very concerning.
Sure.
I thought I was nervous for my parents. I thought, whatever I could do to help. And so the Walker recall petition goes around campus like it did on every college campus. My name's on there. I thought I was helping my parents. Now, inevitably, through all this, that's not what happened. My parents are good teachers. They stayed employed. And also I saw a lot of the vitriol of the left, a lot of the nastiness, a lot of the lies. Like I mentioned, the lies of the teachers unions. And so that really propelled me in the other direction. I wasn't really politically engaged to this point. And again, the values that I mentioned growing up with of faith, of family, of fiscal responsibility, managing your own budget, not spending more than you have, that all lied with the Republican Party platform. And another thing going on at the same time was I was becoming a Christian. I became a Christian through this process. Good morning, Carol. So I became a Christian, and as you know, your life view changes when you make that commitment as well. And so with that, your political views change, your morals, your principles align with your political views. So again, 15 years ago, a lot going on. So that's what propelled me into politics.
How old were you when you became a Christian?
So that was all when I was around 21 years old.
21.
So,
and what, by the way, what led you to that decision?
Yeah. So a big piece of it, I was always, grew up going to church, and so understood things, but not the relationship. And it was just, I was actually asked a question of how do you want your life to be defined? And do you want it to be defined by your career? Do you want it to be defined by your value or your material possessions, right? Or do you want it to be defined by your politics? And it was around that time, right, the political time frame of, I don't want to be defined by my politics. I want to be defined by my faith and how I serve people and what I can do for the greater good for the Lord. So that's what drives me. That's what drives me to be running for office. That's what propels every decision I make. So that, again, very transformative time in my life. And I'm glad I have that perspective. There's a lot of people who have come through the political spectrum too and have made different decisions, right? I mean, even the district, right? The 7th Congressional District. This was a stronghold for Dave Obey, a Democrat, for 42 years. Oh. And around the same time, around 2010, he saw the writing on the wall, retired, and we've been voting Republican ever since. So a lot of change. And another thing that ties to this that's very relatable is, Turning Point USA didn't exist at the time. 15 years ago. Charlie Kirk started that organization about 13 years ago. Would have loved to have a Turning Point at UW-Eau Claire, and now there's some really great conservative movement there. That'd have been instrumental. I figured out myself, but there's a lot more people that have figured things out, not just politically. And I think Charlie Kirk really honed in on this, understanding his own faith and values too, especially in the last few years, that in order to change hearts and minds, you really need to, and therefore people's political beliefs and understandings, you need to change the heart and soul first. You need to have faith. You need to have that first and foremost in order to direct your life. And that's why he, as we've seen in videos, and I watched a lot of his stuff over the past few years, he really became more comfortable talking about that and moving people in that direction. So his legacy is instrumental in how he went about it. Again, heart and soul first to change the mind, and your actions will follow.
Yeah, what did you go to school for at UW-Eau Claire?
Yeah, I went for public relations is my degree. I have a minor in kinesiology, so I went half science.
What's kinesiology? I've heard of that, but what is that?
Yeah, so that is the study of the movement of the human body. Oh. So like your anat and phys, a lot of people who have a kinesiology degree are like physical therapists, occupational therapists. It can be a pre-med degree. So yeah, I did that.
But public relation was your major, right?
Yeah, that was the major.
So when you went into that, what was your thinking in terms of, yes, I want the degree, but really, here's who I want to be when I'm all grown up? Like, what was that in your mind? Like, what did you picture that degree getting you?
That's a good question. Because I liked a lot of things. I think there's a lot of people, right? I went into college undecided because I had a lot of interest and I didn't know what to formulate. Again, I grew up the daughter of teachers, so I really kind of knew the one profession in my household and had a few other family members that did some different things, but a lot of teachers, a lot of farmers in my family, which is great. But I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I liked working with people. I knew that I liked serving people, helping people. And so as I went through and tried different courses and met with different advisors and different professors who specialized in different things, that's what I kept focusing on, is how can I work with people and problem solve and find solutions and navigate and be strategic. Again, in that service component. So public relations was great because it didn't box me in. It gave me the ability to grab some different skills of writing. I mean, right, the themes of the day of good internal of communication. So writing, communication in time. So I did a lot of crisis communications in the early part of my career, which I really enjoy. Not that I enjoy because there's a way, again, I can help people by getting good timely communication to them in a time of need, or they're wondering what is happening. So I did that alongside police. So having that background, again, I found that way to serve alongside my communication skills. So writing, speaking, listening, right, is probably the most important communication skill we have.
My wife keeps telling me that. Yes, I've heard of this. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it right. That's what you're doing here too, right? Listening, communicating, translating. Yeah. So that's why I did that.
Well, I want to go back. So I do want to ask you more about the Walker recall, just when we get to like the campaign part and kind of the views that people may have about you because of that. But when you came to Christ, you said your views kind of changed, which totally understandable, right? That Makes sense. Were you always a conservative and Republican, or because you had two parents that were teachers? How did you grow up? What kind of a family was that politically?
Yeah, so I grew up, um, I was aware, again, we didn't talk about politics
Sure.
much. I think we have to remember that 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago, um, that wasn't a common, it wasn't in the news like it is now. We didn't have social media. There wasn't this constant political discussion, right? Or politicizing of every issue. That just wasn't happening. And so our, dining room conversations, you know, or conversations over supper at night were not about politics. It was about what was going on in our life, right? So I had a great childhood. Um, two parents that cared for me, supported me. But I knew as I got older, I kind of figured out they leaned left. They never told me what to do or how to vote. But I think the teachers union piece, I always kind of knew that sat more with the Democrat Party. Um, but if I look at my values, how I grew up, I mean, we did not. My mom is the queen of balancing a budget, so we did not grow up with spending more than we had, but saving and thinking long term, right? Of well, we could go out to dinner now, but we're not going to because of the greater good. We need to save this money, so we're going to have peanut butter and jelly while we're out and about. We did a lot of that smart decisions in the moment that have a long term impact. And so I mentioned fiscal responsibility, but values of family. It was always about taking care of family. My parents were good stewards of their family and their parents. Um, and those were always priorities and making sure we saw family as much as possible. I didn't live that close to family, so making sure we saw them as near and dear as possible. And then just caring for your neighbors, right? It's how you serve others. Um, especially when you grow up in a small rural community, you see the, this is a big piece. The government's not going to come in and help, right? Um, these are the communities, and the community I grew up in is one of them, of you often feel forgotten. And so the best thing that you can do is care for your neighbor and solve problems locally.
Mhm.
And so that's how I grew up, is if our neighbor down the road had a problem or, a financial strain, then there was a fundraiser in town. If there was something with the farmers down the road, and right, something happened, and this happens a lot in the farming community, then people come in and they help milk their cows, they help take care of, they go and harvest their fields. That's the family and the community that I grew up within. Is just, what do we need to do to help this person? What do we need to do to set them on the right track? My mom the other day was just telling me how she had to go help the neighbors catch their cows. She hasn't been on a farm for decades, and she's still using those skills to go out help the neighbors wrangle their cows. So that's how I grew up. It's
So,
just using
so,
common sense solutions to care for others.
but when it comes to when did you then really kind of identify yourself as a conservative?
Oh yeah, so that was right through the aftermath of the Act 10
Sure,
recall.
got it.
So right by the time I graduated, so I'm 21. By the time I graduated college, by that spring, I had figured out where I was.
Got it. And
So
so you graduate college and you go on to do what?
so then I work in the communications field. Like I mentioned, I did a lot of crisis communications work at the start of my career, and then inevitably ended up kind of utilizing that kinesiology degree with my public relations as I worked in healthcare. So having a little bit more knowledge and understanding. So talk about communication writing, about your subject matter. And I actually did that within Chippewa, Rusk, and Barron counties. So right in our neck of the woods here, of getting local rural healthcare clinics set up so that there was local care for folks. And this was a big deal. So I remember the Ladysmith opening of the healthcare clinic we did back in early part of 2020, and a fifth of the town was there. Because there hadn't been a new business in a long time, and actually having something where you didn't have to drive an hour, 2 hours for the region to have a doctor's appointment, to have something prioritized to do preventative care, that was a big deal. And so that's the kind of work I did for quite a few years. And then was out in the communities. And so a lot of like what we're talking about of growing up and seeing a need. And I got to know folks going on, started hearing more issues on the ground, and kept getting more propelled into finding different ways to serve communities, to serve people, and using the skills I have and the abilities I have to find solutions to problem solve within a system. And at that point, I decided to run for office in 2020. So that was my first run for office.
Okay, but excuse me, before we get to that, so we're up to
Yeah.
you're running for, we have a question here. First of all, I want to throw this up. Angie Sapek, good morning. Looking forward to seeing where the primary election for Republican Congress goes. This is a very important race for the country. And then Adam Jarko has a question. The Northwoods has a lot of people who love to hunt and fish. Tell us your experiences and views on hunting and fishing and how you would be able to effectively advocate for sportsmen in Congress. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, no, good question. So I grew up, while I don't personally hunt, I understand the value and I appreciate it. It's just, to me, it's, I love a good Packers football game, but I can't play professional football. I don't have that background. So I grew up with neighbors who hunt. My parents always, we opened our land and worked with our neighbors and the hunting to make sure they had the access they need and to make sure we always had good communication. So while I don't personally hunt at this point, I do value and understand the importance of it, along with fishing too. And I was just at a gun show in Hayward over the weekend where a lot of these issues came up, right? So I'm talking with a lot of sportsmen, listening to what their concerns are, and they're very focused on, one, the wolf issue, right? Which I know Tom Tiffany has been talking about. That's a huge issue, and what needs to be done at Congress at the federal level is to delist the gray wolf from the Endangered Species Act. So that's ultimate priority. We can hear story after story. I mean, Langley County just had 6 bear hunting dogs that were brutally killed by wolves. And these are, not that far from everyday people, the hunters themselves. And then another thing that came up in that time, so wolves are of ultimate priority, especially in the 7th. And then we also need to look at a common issue coming up, well, not federal, but understanding what's going on within the Northwoods, what's going on within our communities is a common discussion is wake boats and trying to figure that out locally. And then there's some talk about state as well. So those are huge, important things for our region. And by doing, like I talked about, the importance of listening, understanding, meeting people where they're at. So I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up with a farming family, but I've been at a lot of farm tours, and we're talking about the hard decisions that family farms have to make. We're talking about the regulatory limitations that unfortunately have constrained farms of all sizes over the last few years. So all of these are extremely important. One of the most important things too that you can do is a representative, and that I've had even through my everyday public or private sector work is having coalitions, having subject matter experts to refer to, having those advisory groups, those advisory boards of people who are the experts in issues. So whether that's hunting and fishing, energy policy, farming and agriculture, tourism, right? All important issues to our home here. You still want to make sure you have a coalition of really smart people that you can go to who are in the weeds on this every day, day in and day out. And that's who you go to listen and know what's going on.
Yeah, so if I was going to run for Congress, I would get a coalition as well because I've never hunted. I don't fish. I don't know anything about it. I just don't. Like, I know everybody else does, and that's awesome. But my knowledge on this stuff is very, very, very limited. So I would probably want to do a coalition too. Like, okay, you guys just tell me, like, what's going on? What are the issues that you are facing? Because I'm not experiencing it myself. Would that be similarly or a fair assessment as well? Like, I know a little, but honestly, it's just not my bag. It's not my thing.
Yeah, and then you can't. It's important to know, right? You're a representative. You're representative of many. So having coalitions, having advisory groups who are the subject subject matter experts who specialize in this, who that's their everyday passion too. It's extremely important to have that group. So that's my plan throughout the campaign into. When I ran and set up my congressional office. And that's a big part of constituent services, right? And having those people so that you can be there to respond in a timely fashion, to assist as much as possible as your office allows, as the government allows. And that's all part of it. Absolutely. And
All right,
that's that
so
listening communication piece, right? So
yeah, totally get it. So we're up to. So you ran for. You decided to run for office, right? This was 2020. What office were you running for?
So at that time, I was living in Eau Claire. So I ran in the Republican primary for the 3rd Congressional District. And so and I went up against, I was green. I knew there was an opportunity to represent people, good people, And I knew there was a winning path, that third could be flipped from Democrat to Republican. And inevitably it was, which is great. I was in the Republican primary against a well-funded candidate, a more experienced campaign. And you learn a lot from a loss, if you choose to, right? So you have decisions to make after you lose of, do you sit and sulk, or do you look to improve and get better? And so I knew that one, I would look to improve and get better, and would go out and do that. And then the weeks to follow, because this is the 2020 election, so the presidential cycle. So President Trump was at the top of the ballot, and then there were Republican candidates throughout, and I went out and knocked doors. So within the 2 weeks after I lost, I was out knocking doors for candidates up and down the ballot, because it always is the most important, and it was the most important thing that I could do to help the cause, to help the conservative cause, to help Republican candidates, and continue that mission.
Who won that race in 2020?
So I was up against Derek Van Orden in that race, who inevitably became the congressman of the 3rd Congressional.
I see. All right. So, what were you doing then from after that until you decided to announce for the 7th Congressional District? And we'll get to kind of like how did that all transpire? But what were you doing for work in the meantime?
Yeah. So after that, like I said, went out, knocked doors, got to the folks, helped Republicans get elected. I mean, thousands of doors, hundreds of miles. And then I now, in the last 5+ years, I've been working for a manufacturer, a very large global manufacturer. And what I do specifically there is fight bad policy. So, and a lot of federal policy. And where we see is a lot of it was federal, and so it's coming not just from Congress, but specifically from the regulatory agencies. So you see more regulation than legislation. And a big piece of this is because Congress has given up a lot of its authority, a lot of its accountability. And so where they used to write laws that would say, this is what we need to do to solve this problem, this is a law we need to set up. Instead, they write, this is an important issue. This regulatory agency that we assigned is now going to take hold of it and going to control the decision of the regulation, not a law, a regulation, a rule set up by people who are on these commissions or committees that are appointed by the U.S. Senate, but they are not elected. So there's no accountability to the voters, to the people that they are impacting with their decisions. And so that's what a lot of I've faced, is navigating that space, having some major wins of getting federal regulation overturned. And I talk a lot about regulation because that's the space I work in, but it's extremely important if we look at something that adds cost to a business. So because of extra time, or because of, say, a certification that has to be added, there's additional cost. So all those things bog down business, which therefore they have less funds to pay their employees. They have less funds or opportunities to grow and expand and offer more jobs to a community. And some of these regulations actually end up shutting businesses down because they cannot take on the financial toll that it costs. And so when I look at how that translates here within our state, within our region, within the Northwoods, we want to make sure we have manufacturing up and running. We need to make sure that the federal government gets out of the way. The government does not become the barrier to success for businesses, for people, and for communities here. So that's what I've been working on in the last 5 years. Again, I'm going to talk about it. It translates in the sense of what I want to do is solve those problems that I've been solving from the outside, go to Congress and make sure that the government is working for the people and not against people, not against industry. Especially if we want to have the resurgence that we can in the Northwoods of communities that have been left. Businesses have left, and therefore people have left, right? If there's no work, people have to leave and go find work. But we have the blueprint ready to go of if we can have the resurgence, if we can have the onshoring of manufacturing, we're ready for that up here. But the government needs to make sure it's not a constraint. So that goes to all levels.
Where do you live now?
So I mentioned we previously lived in Eau Claire, so we had our son, and we ended up moving to, so I have a little boy. We moved to Stanley, Wisconsin. So, and that we're just down the road. That's where my husband's family is from. We're just down the road from our family's farm of 95 years. So it's not quite 100, not quite a century farm, but it's getting close. So it's good to be amongst family. This is one of the communities. I crack up because I don't have to spell my last name. People just know it. So, and it's one of those weird last names that sounds a little different than it's spelled. So it's been good to be here. We moved here after we had our son to be closer to family. So that's where I'm at now. Is
When did you move?
So we moved at the start or at the first part of this year. So a few months ago.
Oh, just okay, got
More
it.
than that now. Yeah. Time flies when you have a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah, yeah. So you move, and then you're running for the 7th. There's going to be, I mean, clearly you've already kind of thought you're going to be facing these kinds of questions from on your campaign trail. What do you say to people that, okay, you ran in the 3rd, you didn't win there, then you moved to the 7th. You may live here, but you're not from here. Uh, uh, how are you going to respond to those questions? Because I'm sure you're going to get asked that if you have not already by people that you've already talked to. How do you overcome that? How do you explain that?
Yeah, well, like I said, we moved to be closer to family. So that's put us in Stanley. We have, and I'm a seventh generation Wisconsinite. I have roots throughout this entire state. So having those connections, understanding the state, and another thing to note, right, if we're talking about congressional lines, is a way of life is not defined by a congressional line. I mean, the lines of the seventh, the third, the sixth, the eighth have changed. I mean, the entire state, right, has changed time and time again. They constantly move. And again, a way of life is not defined by a congressional line. But, we are here. We're with family. And as Tom Tiffany started looking more seriously at the governorship, which again would mean that this seat would open up. And it got more serious over the last few months. I had some conversations with people. I had people reaching out to me of what that would look like to run in the 7th and at the right time. And that's how we kind of put that together. It's just a strong coalition of supporters for this office at the right time.
Sure. So I guess what I was really kind of going more towards is let's look at like 3 things. What are your 3 biggest? And by the way, Dave Wilson had a question here. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the 3 biggest obstacles that you have to overcome from when you go around and you're meeting people. I'm assuming we've already identified 2 of the 3, right? The question of, but you're not from here. And you could give the answer, but what if that is like that's a big deal for me. Like, I don't know how I can overcome that one. I'm just saying that's probably going to be one in your top 3 things that people are going to have a concern about. The Walker recall signing it. Speaking of that, let's go back to that right now. You can explain all of that, but there are some people that will absolutely say this is a deal breaker. Like, it's an unforgivable thing. You can explain it all day long. Here was the situation. Here's what happened. But there's going to be some people that are like, that's it. Nope. How do you respond to those? How do you anticipate answering those? Even after you explain, well, here's the why. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to overcome that at all? I don't mean the election total. I just mean to an individual that you're talking to. Or is it just, okay, that's a thing for them. I get it, but I don't know what else you want me to tell you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, right? So this is in a one-on-one conversation setting, right? So of what's important to them. So if there's, maybe we talk about what issues are important to them. We talk about what they want to get done at the federal level, what they want their member to represent for them. And so talking about, right, is that wolves that's most important? Is that the the lack of not wanting the infringement of their constitutional rights? Is it someone who can go in and navigate the complexities of Congress with the over 10 years, 15 years of the experience I have within my career of working within those spaces, of understanding that? So is that the goal of how do you want your representative to work? And I think it's, again, I've had these conversations before. I ran previously, and it's what's important to people and meeting people while they're at. So I mentioned my faith, right? So a big conversation is if faith is most important and they're struggling on the recall pieces, people have changed their minds over the years. And especially, I'm going to go back to Turning Point USA, and what their goal has been is to change minds on college campuses, right? To open people to new ideas. So we need to make sure that as conservatives, as those in the Republican Party, that, right, we want new voters. We want people to be part of our movement. We want people to understand the values that we're fighting for, of the conservative principles that therefore help us set up a better country, not for ourselves, but our next generations as well. And with that, there's going to be a changed mind. And so we have to make sure we don't punish people for their past, right? And that's the grace. If I talk about faith, that's the grace part about things too, right? I mean, Paul was out there, Saul to Paul, right, was out there, crucifying Christians, and it changed his mind, wrote some of the most impactful letters that are within our New Testament today.
Basically wrote like half the New Testament, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So, and those words are valued, they're referenced, they are truth. And so having that greater picture and having understanding, again, there are people, this district voted for Dave Obey for 42 years, and again started voting in 2010 for Republicans with the Tea Party movement. And then you had, in 2016, you had the surge of President Trump, and especially as a champion of the forgotten men and women, and that resonated here. And then, through 2020 and now 2024 is a success of that as well, in these waves. And you bring more people, because that's what it's about, of showing people that we want the American dream, we care about the America that you do. But all of that, you're going to have changed minds, you're going to have changed hearts. And if there wasn't a major influx where Dave Obey was getting almost 60% of the vote, and then you have a Republican getting about that amount shortly after, those are the same people voting. Those are the same people who have changed their mind. And so that's the people right here in the district. So understanding why people change their mind, and why they care about, and having thought about things critically. I highly encourage that. And again, that's it with Turning Point, with other groups that are on college campuses, especially of getting to young people to talk about the issues that matter to them, to open their eyes to other thoughts, to other principles, to how the government interacts with them, how the government interferes, and especially young people with what the government did with lockdowns, with mandates, with shutting down their schools, shutting down their communities. I mean, there's a reason that we're seeing a resurgence of conservatism in the younger generation now on college campuses. Again, I wish Turning Point had been there when I was in college, but I'm glad I came to the realization I had when I had it to propel me. And without that, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have that understanding of folks who have had different mindsets, different thought processes, and are conservative now or becoming conservative, right? There's always some issue that just peaks up for people that becomes a turning point for them.
So what would be a third thing? So maybe we can even almost look at it like what are your opponents going to go after you for? I'm sure you've thought about that. You started a campaign. This isn't your first campaign. If the walker recall, yep, they're going to bring that up. And moving into the district, maybe they're going to go after that, saying that I'm not from here. What would be a third thing that you're like, okay, I got to make sure I got an answer ready for this because I know they're going to go after me for this?
Well, I think previously, so I'm 35. So looking at the average age of members in Congress, right? So it's lower than that, but I think that's an advantage, right? If you're looking at age, because of the failed status quo, because of lifelong politicians, career politicians, we are at a stalemate oftentimes within legislation or within the process themselves of this is how we've done it. This is how we need to do it. We need a resurgence of energy. And so, but having the experience, right? So I'm not new to this. I have experience. I've been working, since I was 14, babysitting prior to that, having over 25 years of working, which is, that work ethic is extremely important to our values here in Wisconsin and rural Wisconsin. So taking that experience specifically, like I've been talking about through manufacturing, that private sector experience, understanding how to problem solve, understanding how to find solutions and how to navigate, and how policy works throughout a business. And it's not just one thing. There's often unintended consequences, right? So Congress especially has a reputation of trying to quickly solve something, and government really should move slow, but they try to solve a problem. But then it creates these unintended consequences, these ripple effects that have negative impacts throughout maybe that business or in other industries, and trying to prevent that, trying to think really long term. But that's why you need someone with private sector experience who understands how these policies impact things, how they directly can impact a supply chain of a global market. For example, I know I talk about regulation, but understanding how there's so much overburdensome regulation that adds cost to business here in the United States, here within our state and with our region, and within the seventh. By adding on those additional costs, business over the past few decades has been pushed overseas. And so, because it's more affordable to make a product over there. And I'll give you an example. It is more affordable to chop down a tree, use that log, that timber, send it overseas to make a product, to manufacture the finished good overseas, ship it back over, and distribute it throughout the, put it through the supply chains, transport it on tractor trailers, on semis throughout the United States, maybe even on rail, is more affordable to do that than it is to produce something here in the United States. And that's because of regulation, not only through the manufacturing process itself, it's because of the additional regulation requirements. Healthcare costs. Healthcare is one of the biggest costs for a company. I'm not going to give the percentage of each different business, but it is a big part of businesses' regular budgets, and the most burdensome thing for them to grow here in the United States. So we need to do something about that. But all these regulations are limitations for growth in the United States, and they've been piling up, which has sent work overseas. So in order for us to reshore, in order for us to onshore and have domestic manufacturing, not only here in the United States, but within the 7th Congressional, we need to get the government out of the way, and we need people who understand that and understand how regulation from the EPA, from the USDA, from all these acronyms of regulatory agencies over the years have piled up and completely limited our ability to grow and produce. I truly don't know how you could start a new manufacturing in business, even small, because of the regulations not only at the federal level but the state level. I'm focused on federal policy, but the state level too are complete limitations and complexities for companies to be compliant. And it's just too bad. So that needs to completely change if we want to have the golden age here in America that President Trump is championing. And I am all about that. But the next steps is get the government out of the way. Permitting process, if you want to build here, it takes too long to get going. If you want to have the energy, what big thing that manufacturers look for if we want to bring jobs into community, if we want to set up shop, in a rural community, have the jobs to provide here, make sure the community's prosperous. Well, oftentimes that permitting takes too long, but you need to reliable, affordable energy. And so it can take 7 years to get an energy production going, whether that's natural gas or that's coal or, wind and solar are not reliable enough. If the wind's not blowing, if the sun's not shining, there is no energy going to the grid. And if we don't have enough energy on the grid, there's no way that a manufacturing operation can be sufficiently operating here. So I know I'm going down the path, but there's so many complexities to business, to operations, and what that means for people and their livelihoods as employees, as employers, as community members, that if we don't look at this from the greater picture and understand how federal policy has been a major limitation, we're not going to get to where we need to in time.
So were you saying that your age would be one of those issues at 35? Is that because you're too old or too young?
Too young. I mean, that was something last time.
I mean, I don't know. It's not that young, because if that's oh my goodness, that'd be bad for me if that's too young.
Well, you're starting to see, right, and that conversation's been out there, but we're starting to see millennials, right? So I'm a millennial, get involved at this federal level, and so there's a good amount. How would you say a good amount? But about 2 handfuls of people that are around my age that have gone into Congress and are doing great work, and have a different mindset, right? They have different lived experience. We grew up during a different time, and then there's also, you look at J.D. Vance, right? Former U.S. Senator, now the Vice President, and doing a great job. He's a great messenger. He's a great leader, and really showing. It's nice as a fellow millennial to see he's really showcasing his skills, his abilities, his lived experience, and how it applies for his role in the federal government.
I thought I saw an article. It was about you, because I Googled your name this morning. Anytime I have a first-time guest on, I don't really prepare for these. I just want to be an organic conversation. But usually about 15 minutes before we go live, I Google someone, and I saw an article, and I don't know if it was you that said it or maybe the author of it, and you were at an event, or maybe it was your kickoff announcement, I can't remember. But in there it said that if you won, you would be the first female, no, first woman. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't know if there's a difference anymore. It's a new world. We're all adjusting, right? So I don't know if I'm supposed to say female or woman, but whatever. The first woman as
I am not.
a congressional representative from Wisconsin. Is that true?
The first, Republican woman. Yep, we've had Democrat women elected. We've never had a
Republican woman. I must have missed that part.
Congress. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's been great, we have such a great history here in Wisconsin of our politics. We're a battleground state, so everyone's always interested in what's going on. But that comes from, we don't have to register, right? We don't have to declare Republican or Democrat. But let's go back further into our history. We, in Ripon, Wisconsin, we formed the Republican Party, right, to fight slavery back in the 1800s. And, we should be so proud of that. We should talk about that more here in our state. We should talk about that more as the Republican Party of Wisconsin. It's something we should be very, we're humble here, but we should be proud of that. We should be proud that we formulated and created the Republican Party. And then in addition to that, we were the first state to pass the 19th Amendment, which is giving the women the right to vote. So we in Wisconsin have, the strong history of really leading at a national level amongst the other states. And so, yes, there's a lot there. It would be a great honor. We've had great Republican women elected at all levels, from local to state, and we're just missing that piece. So it would be, it would be great to have that honor. But I look forward to earning people's votes for the work I'm doing, and the issues I'm talking about, and how I'd be able to find solutions and work to represent the people of the 7th Congressional.
I went onto your website this morning as well, and the first 3 bullet points. So it's Ebben for Wisconsin, EBBEN, and then it's FOR, Wisconsin.com, and it says Trump conservative, political outsider, heartland values. Trump conservative. What is that? Maybe another way to ask that is, what's the difference between a Trump conservative and just a conservative, in your view?
Yeah, so I'm an absolute supporter of President Trump, the work he's doing. And I mean, since back in 2016 and how he fought for the forgotten men and women. And I mean, that's really what resonated when he started talking about that with me, having grown up in a small rural town where we do help ourselves. The government doesn't need to help us. It just needs to not get in the way. But making sure those voices mattered, our way of life mattered, right? Our rural way of life matters. And Trump has championed that. Even as this businessman from New York City, right? He went out, understood people, what they cared about. And so I've been an avid supporter. And so the Trump conservative is looking at this broader tent, right? This coalition. So I've talked about people who have changed their mind over the last few years. And we know that's happened because we've seen the vote shift in Wisconsin, right? We used to be a blue state that's moved from purple. And I truly think we're a Republican state. We just need to get out the vote consistently. And so the way he's fought, the way he hasn't backed down. I mean, the man was almost assassinated over a year ago. And, and he stood up and he said, fight, fight, fight. I mean, that was a rallying cry for people who've just been knocked down by one thing or another, by life hitting them, by losing a job, by, the plant they work at shutting down. And it has, an impact on their family, right? And what decision next? Do they have to move? These are things that American people have been dealing with. These are things that especially in rural America and rural Wisconsin, we've been dealing with that have been hardships time and time again. And to have someone who doesn't stop fighting, that's why I support the president and his policies and what he's trying to do and what he's done to put America back on the stage in a respectful standing once again, and informed policy-wise, and then what he's done within our own country to just try to get us back on track. We've fallen behind with the Biden administration, with the Obama administration, tremendously on the global scale. And he's trying within his 4 years to get what he can done. And I want to be part of that in the last 2, to make sure we have the House majority, to make sure we have people fighting for the American people, to get the America First agenda done, to make America great again, which is what the popular vote voted for, right? The majority of Americans voted for that. So I'm right aligned with them. And that's how I view a Trump conservative, is he's been fighting for the people.
Would it be more accurate to say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, clearly, but it's almost like I'm conservative and a Trump supporter? Because I was trying to figure out, what's the I was actually, again, it wasn't like rhetorical or sarcastic. I'm like, maybe there is a difference between a Trump conservative and just, I don't know what you, I don't know what else you'd call them, just a
Yeah, I mean
conservative.
that's that's accurate. You're good.
Oh,
It's
wait,
just you know showing that supporting the president,
sure.
supporting his agenda, working with him, being a reinforcement to help get that done, um, with conservative policies, with conservative principles.
Your second one was political outsider. I'm not gonna lie. When I hear political outsider, I always think of like people saying that, "Oh, I'm not a career politician." It's kind of like the same thing. It's like a
Yeah.
campaign thing, where it just means a political outsider. I haven't done it yet, and I don't have a ton of experience in that realm in terms of doing that job. So use it to your advantage, right? You want to take something and say, "No, I'm a political outsider." But in 2 years, if you win and you run again, you're gonna have to change your website page because you have to take out political outsider because now you
Yes,
are
yes.
you are a part of this system now. But what does a political outsider mean to you?
So, I mean, again, I've been talking about, right, coming from private sector, and we look at some of the most impactful. I mentioned Trump, right? He was a political outsider, right? He came from the business sector, has been frustrated, worked through the complexities of the government. And then you have someone like Ronald Reagan, too, right? I mean, total outsider. He came through, his background is, right, fighting the unions within Hollywood. And then he became the Republican governor. But he took that experience, right, that political advocacy, the political work he had doing, took that knowledge to become the governor of California, and then eventually the president of the United States. So having different experiences, having a different angle, and why you're fighting, I think, also makes you a political outsider, of not fighting for special interests, of showing up every day to fight for your constituents, to and looking at things differently. And I've mentioned that a few times, of finding solutions. So that's what you have to do in the private sector. That's what you have to do in the manufacturing business I work in, is if there is a supply chain disruption, if there is a sourcing disruption where we can't get component parts in the time we need to from the supplier we always get them from, we need to be nimble, we need to be agile, and we need to think differently of how to solve this problem. How do we change production? Do we need to change what we're producing? Do we need to go through a new supplier? How do we create those relationships? So it's that mentality of not going, this is the way it's always been, or there's no way. That's where I've had success of working from the outside, right? Political outside, working from the outside on policy, is questioning it differently of, well, what else can be done? How else can we solve this problem? What other solution is there? Or if this is the barrier and we're trying to get around it, how can we remove that barrier instead of trying to, go over the hill, go around it? How can we remove that hill? So just thinking differently, and doing it for the people that you're representing,
On your
and just
web
being grounded in that.
on your website as well, under issues, and there, if anybody wants to go and find out more about where you stand on issues, just go to ebbenforwisconsin.com. Under issues, under your pro-life part of it, it said that you are a fiercely pro-life. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, as a mother, this has always been an important issue for me, but as a mother, I'm even more emboldened in my pro-life views and stances. I mean, abortion hurts everyone. It hurts the mother and it kills the child. And so, I've talked about from my faith of where I stand, and how I view things. And this is one of them that I've just become more encouraged to make sure I'm standing in the right on it, and fighting for the unborn, and making sure that fighting for the unborn and making sure that mothers have the resources they need to keep their child, making sure we're supporting them.
And what
So
is then your view and stance on that? What are you comfortable with? Everyone seems to have a different. Like, I'd be okay with this. I'd be okay with this. I would accept this. What is yours? Do you have a, this is where I am, and I would never vote for anything that was whatever it is. Maybe it's a 20-week thing or whatever. Where is your actual? How do you answer that question? Because it's going to come up. What is your stance on abortion specifically?
yeah, so I mean, with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, this is no longer at the federal level, right? It's down to the state issues. So where I look at things is, we're always pressed on I mean, I am an advent 100% pro-life. We need to also look at what the Democrats are doing, which is atrocious, and specifically what's being done in Minnesota, where you can get an abortion up to 9 months. You can get abortion up to the point of birth. And actually, a baby can be born alive through an abortion, and they do not have to save that child. And that is happening in the state of Minnesota. That is happening right across the river from us in our neighboring state. Children are dying because of the policies they've set up. And it's not for the health of the mother. It's not for the, this is a lot of these are for just convenience, for or deemed convenience. And that is what Minnesota is doing. We need to talk more about the other direction that is going on this issue. And states like our neighbor here in the Midwest of Minnesota are going beyond too far, too far. And we're not talking about it enough. The Democrats like to control this conversation, but we need to highlight what Tim Walz, right, the crazy VP candidate from Minnesota, what he is doing and leading and championing in his state is the death of unborn children.
How much money is a congressional race? This is considered a relatively safe Republican seat. You don't want to jinx it, and you never know. But
you always got to work for it. You never,
certainly, absolutely right. But how much money is this? What, $5 million you have to raise for this seventh congressional seat? What's the ballpark number you think someone has to raise to be competitive?
You could do less than that. I mean, a big thing about this, yes, you do have to raise money in the low millions. That's not a low number at all. That is a number that I've never seen. But you do have to raise money in the low millions, but you also have to get out and about and meet people, right? You have to go out. I talked a lot about listening, meeting people where they're at. But it's true. I mean, this weekend, I was at a gun show, I was at a pumpkin fest, I was at a cranberry fest. When you're out meeting with people, you hear, you have a good sense of what's going on the ground within their region, right? The 7th Congressional is huge. It's almost a third of the state. And so there's a lot varying from one side to the other, right? You have the Great Lakes part, you have the along the Mississippi, you have the other part that goes to more of the eastern side. And so understanding what is most important to people within the counties, within the regions of the district, it is vital. So getting out and about. So hard work is still crucial. It is, to answer your questions, it's in the low millions.
Low millions. Have you heard of anybody else that's a Republican or Democrat side? Have you heard any of the names floating around?
There's a few names out there. I'm focused on what I can do to make sure that we have a good race, a good campaign, a good clean campaign. And that's going to help a variety of things here. So one, having a unified 7th is crucial. I've gone through a primary before, right? Making sure it's clean, it's focused on the issues, running straight ahead. And that not only is good for the 7th, right? It's good for the people of the 7th. It is good for Tom Tiffany, who is running for governor. And we need to make sure we turn out every single vote in the state. The 7th Congressional was absolutely pivotal to Trump winning in 2024 here in the state. The rural vote specifically that came out of the Northwoods and then had some ripple effects into surrounding districts. But the 7th Congressional as a whole, the turnout, I mean, there were counties turning out 96, 95% of the vote, which is unheard of. That's unheard of. So the turnout was huge. Having that carry into the midterms for not just the congressional seat, but for the top of the ticket for our governor, which is the most important seat that we're fighting for in this 2026 election cycle, to really put everything on track. I'm talking a lot about federal policy, but if we really want, if I'm right, my role is get the government out of the way at the federal level. May it not be a barrier. Do what we need to do. Delist the gray wolf. Make sure permitting is expedited for energy, which therefore leads to strong manufacturing within our country, within our state, within the district. Then make sure that the state is ready to operate, is ready and open for business again, right? Those signs came down when Tony Evers became governor. Put them back up. Say, Tom Tiffany welcomes you. We're open for business. Because if we don't have business here, if we don't have manufacturing, if we don't have that operational and up and running, we're not going to keep people of my generation and generations to come within the state, because we need to have jobs, to have livelihoods, to have the strong communities, to have the resurgence that I know is available. But that happens when we have someone like Tom Tiffany, who is leading the state with experience from not only the federal level, but he's a very strong state senator, and he understands things to a great complexity. But he knows that the solutions are there to get our state right on track. Tom has talked about how much he loves the state. I'm right there with him. I don't want to leave. If we have bad policy set in place, I do not want to leave the state. I do not want it to become the next Minnesota, the next Illinois. We are conservative. The values we have here, we are the heartland, the way we live our life, the way that we take care of each other, the way we value family, the way we value community, and the way we work so hard, and we're humbly proud of that. And those are crucial for leading the nation. Wisconsin's always going to be at the forefront of our nation, like I mentioned, from the Republican Party to the 19th Amendment to just how we lead as a manufacturer. Per capita, Wisconsin is tied right now with Indiana of the most manufacturing per capita. I mean, that's leading. When manufacturing is operational, the amount of jobs it not only provides, but the amount of companies it's supporting, right? Think vendors. It's keeping other businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses operating as well. So all that to say, we need to make sure that we're turning out, staying united, and fighting for Tom Tiffany along the way.
So do you think Josh Schoeman should drop out?
I'm never going to tell a candidate not to run or what to do. Not at all. That is Josh's decision. I'm just supporting Tom. Josh is a great guy. He's got a great message. Tom Tiffany is the leader that we needed this time.
This has been great. We went way past our time, and we could talk a lot more. And of course, you're welcome to come back on the show in the future. Tell us how the campaign is going. But is there anything that you wanted to make sure that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about yet?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me on, Ben.
Of course.
I mean, these are the times of, you're Joe Rogan before Joe Rogan, right? The long form. And these are important conversations to have, to actually talk through things. Right? People are complex. This is what I enjoy about campaigning, is meeting people, hearing from them, hearing their life story, because then you understand why people value, why they fight for what they fight for. And so the big thing is we've got a great campaign. We've set up a really strong team, a really strong platform, and making sure that, I'm working day in and day out, early to rise, late to make sure that the people hear the conservative principles that Tom Tiffany has been fighting for, that we continue to solidify those in Congress, continue the great work that he has done, and again, carry that forward, and just make sure that people know that I'm working for them. The experience I have, I will not only work for them in DC, but have strong constituent services right here in the district. We often talk about the DC portion, but we can't forget the constituent services side of the office as well, and serving people that, have had an issue with the government or at the federal level, whether them and their family, and making sure that we have that strongly set up. So that's a priority as well. But just to take a step back at a high level is, I want to make sure this is a great state. And I love rural America. I love the communities, and as a whole, we have some larger cities too in the district. Nothing to this extent of Madison or Milwaukee, but we have some larger populations. But the way of life that has been established here, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose our state. I don't want to lose what people have established. My family's been here for over 7 generations. I'm so thankful they decided to set up shop here, that they decided to root us here in this great state. The American dream has become, has slipped out of reach over the last few years. And I want to make sure that it is attainable once again. It is achievable once again for not only, my son and his generation, right, the children, but our grandchildren. And so it's going to take hard decisions. It's going to take hard work. And it's an honor to be able to do that. And it's an honor to even be able to run for this office. So I look forward to going out and earning everyone's support, earning your vote, having more great conversations about policy, about issues, and what's important to folks, and making sure our values and priorities and our way of life is fought for at the federal level.
Well, best of luck to you. And thank you for coming on. And again, people, you can go to ebbenfortwisconsin.com to find out more. Jessi, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, special thank you to Republican candidate for Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, Jessi Ebben, for taking the time to come on for a chat today. And thank all of you for your comments. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get to a lot of those. I'll see all of you this Thursday at 8:30 a.m. when I'll be joined once again by, speaking of, the 7th Congressional District Representative Tom Tiffany, who joins us every second Thursday of the month. So until then, thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.